Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. Time for another show. Really time for another month. But we've decided to tack an extra day onto February just for fun because we've been having such a great February. And we'll do that one tomorrow rather than today. Today was supposed to be the last day, but you know how it is with these leap years. They sneak in an extra day. They put in an Olympic competition, occasionally a presidential contest as well. Oh, yes. Right. That happened again yesterday. Yesterday was Tuesday. We're having proper primary season now. Primaries are happening on Tuesday when they always have happened, even though they really ought to happen as they did in South Carolina on Saturdays when more people can go and vote. But you know how it is. We hate it when people go vote in this country, so we got to get rid of that, first of all. Let me write that down for later. Get rid of voting and democracy. And it was Michigan that had the contest, but as I recall something, Greg said they were having like 500,000 primaries or something. So we'll straighten all of that out and see what it means. And I saw people already, by mid-evening already complaining that, and they were right, that many of the major newspapers were continuing with their theme, in which they expressed the results of the primary in these terms, that Donald Trump captures some significant percentage less of the vote in his Republican primary than does Joe Biden in his Democratic primary. And the headlines are nonetheless that Biden struggles in his primary, struggles to unify his party, whereas Trump romps to victory once again, even though, you know the situation. It's just what they love to do for whatever reason. We can complain about it or we can scream about it. Those are two. I was going to say we could do something about it, but we could also just turn up the volume on our complaints as well. Very rarely credited, that technique, but it's popular and it might even be what happens today. There's nothing we're going to be able to do about it today, of course. So, all right, we dive in. Plenty to get to, of course, that and the continuing foibles in the courtroom for the former guy, and it only gets worse each day. And, I don't know what else to tell you. Some random notes from around the country and around the world we could chime in with. But let's see. I had some wild story this morning, like out of nowhere. Can I still get this on my phone? Some New Mexico teacher. This is a random story that has nothing to do with anything, although we could turn it into something, I'm sure. A New Mexico teacher, in an interesting twist to the bringing a gun to school, has brought swords to school. And the other twist, not to fend off a potential mass shooter with swords. I mean, that seems like a pretty poor choice of weapon, but rather brought several of them, 2 of them at least, to school for the students to fight one another in class. And so I'm looking for like the edge here where you might say, all right, well, it's a history class, so they're teaching the history of dueling, something like that. And maybe they were fencing swords. Is this not a good idea? But still, no. Brought like sabers, and it was chemistry class. And so I'm not really sure what they were attempting to teach. And I guess the whole idea is they were not really trying to teach anything. The teacher is crazy. So I don't know what the story is there. I'll share the story with you because it's just so unbelievable. But there you have it. A lawsuit claims that a Volcano Vista teacher has brought out swords and instructed students to fight, and of course there was a serious injury. Like they were actual sharp swords, and somebody got cut pretty badly. And I don't know what's going on, and I don't think that they offer any explanation in here either. It's just I don't know, some crazy thing happened, and I guess in a couple of months, years, whatever, after the lawsuits are over, we'll get to the bottom of it. and perhaps try and figure out what, if anything, this teacher was thinking. But at any rate, I don't know. I guess it's okay because they had swords hundreds of years ago, so the Supreme Court is okay with it. And you should just do they have any kind of protection and all? The kids' faces are blurred out, so I can't tell whether they put on any fencing masks. But I suppose if they're wearing fencing masks, they wouldn't have bothered blurring their faces out, so it doesn't seem to be any real protection involved there. I don't know. Seems like a bad idea. And we'll see what we make of it. I don't know. Honestly, I guess if you thought things were really going crazy wherever you lived, you could say to yourself, sure, there's guns in the school, but at least there aren't swords, I guess. And by the way, when people are stabbed and run through by sabers, let us please make sure that they clean up the blood in the correct bathroom. Thank you very much. That's the real problem. And also, we should probably now go through the library and ban books with swords in them as well, I guess, just to make sure that kids aren't getting weird ideas from literature. I don't think that should pose a problem, right? All right. Anyway, lots of real stories, including those from Michigan. Greg Dworkin is here. He's got them collected. He'll remind us why there are 700 different contests. And then, and we go, not just in Michigan, of course. There are umpteen other 100 contests still to go in all the other states. They're all going at once on some gigantic Tuesday or something like that. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. So before we get to Michigan, let's finish up that thought because some interesting things happened yesterday. At the very end of the list that I sent you, I have a Bridge, Michigan piece about a court ruling.
Uh-oh.
Which is preliminary, but still significant. All right. A judge decided that Christina Caramo properly was removed as Michigan GOP chair.
Well, congratulations. Christina, you've done something properly.
That the convention that she's organizing in Detroit next week may not happen.
Well,
because she doesn't have access to any funds, so who's going to pay for like the rent of the venue, for example?
Oh, yeah. Well, there is that. All right. Well,
so that was a big ruling. It's a preliminary injunction requiring her to relinquish control of the GOP assets and not use them for anything.
All right.
Which is a stinging legal defeat for Caramo, the article says, who has continued to oversee bank accounts and official party communications amid a leadership fight with former Ambassador Pete Hoekstra. I guess Ambassador outranks representative because he's also a former representative,
guess so.
Whom critics chose to replace her.
Well, it's an interesting lesson. All of you Republicans who are participating in state parties headed by lunatics and who throw your hands up and say, nothing we can do. We just got to wait it out and we'll elect someone different next time. Right. No excuse.
Also, boys and girls, if you're going to try to chair a party, don't piss off your co-chair because Melinda Pago, Caramo's co-chair, is the one who sued her to force her out.
Well, yeah, you gotta have loyalty. That's the way it works. The
judge decided the plaintiffs who sued Caramo are likely to prevail at trial because they removed her in a January 6 meeting, and I quote, pursuant to party bylaws, end quote. For those of you who are process people, process matters in a court.
That's true. They're totally into that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they had less people than Caramo managed to get together. She got some lawyers and had a counter vote. And they all voted for her for some reason. And there were more of them.
Wow.
And fewer of the others. And the judge said that doesn't really matter. They followed the rules, so that's what counts.
All right. As long as they had enough to constitute a quorum, I guess that would. The judge says that's enough. The judge could be a lunatic. That's a possibility.
So therefore, I was going to present to you.
Yes.
The question, the choice. Right. Door number 1, door number 2.
2.
Did you want, well, we are going to do 2, because did you want to cover Biden or did you want to cover Trump in the Michigan primary? And if you say neither, welcome to the 2024 electorate, but you don't get that choice.
I'm uncommitted on this. I can't tell you who I want to.
Yeah, well, then it's going to be door number 2 because we already started with Caramo and the Michigan GOP.
Yeah, that sounds like it makes sense. 2.
All right. So we'll do door number 2. And there's just all these interesting things here. Matt McDermott points out Joe Biden won 443,674 more votes than Obama did in 2012.
Oh.
Meanwhile, Uncommitted won 80,000 more. Well, Politico reports it, as you pointed out, that the uncommitted was really the thing. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, on the Republican side, Trump once again didn't do all that well. Justin Wolfers points out, according to the polls, Trump was meant to win Iowa by 53 points. He won by 30. Mm-hmm. New Hampshire by 18 points. He won by 11. South Carolina by 28 points. He won by 20. And Michigan by 62 points. He's up by 42, and I think that's what he's going to wind up with, somewhere in that range. So 4 states, 4 examples of him dramatically underperforming his polls.
Very strongly underperforming.
Yeah, he strongly lost.
Right. Exactly.
He won. The main
he's getting the delegates
of the Republican and Democratic primary results from Michigan is that both leading candidates won. And so, if you want to step back and look at the big picture, Kyle Kondik says, I was just thinking back on all the dramatic primary memories I've had over the years of following this stuff, and how none of the primaries this year have even come close adding to the list. And academic Adam Schiffer chimes in, as one-time scholar and always enthusiastic observer of nominations, I feel like the Olympics were canceled this year.
Well, they were. So, they're in Paris, which is not very exciting.
Yeah, but they're missing the important things here. Now, I was watching this at the edge of my chair because the way that the vote came in was very reminiscent of the old red wave stuff.
Okay.
The early vote was very much pro uncommitted, for example.
Oh, I see. All right. Yeah.
But also was pro Dean Phillips. And yet in the beginning, as the same day vote, as the election day vote came in, it tended more toward Biden. Well, more on that in a bit. But it tended more toward Marianne Williamson. She caught and passed him. And in the end, Marianne Williamson got 3% of the vote and Dean Phillips got 2.7% of the vote.
Well,
so Phillips finishes behind Biden at 81, uncommitted at 13, Marianne Williamson at 3, and Dean Phillips at 2.7. So it was neck and neck, but Williamson finally squeaked it out. I don't see how Kyle Kondik can say this was boring because it was so close that it was just shifting back and forth constantly. And wait, there's more.
Oh.
Phillips did so poorly, he made the suspended candidacy of Marianne Williamson.
Yes.
You got dramatic music?
I do. I have several, but yes. Okay. That one. I need something more tense.
He made Marianne Williamson unsuspend.
Unsuspend? Can you even do that?
She's now back in the race.
No! I can't believe it. Okay. I don't know why, but there she is.
I don't see how Kyle Kondik can say like that,
Exactly.
It's so boring when stuff like this is happening. That's bullshit.
Exactly. I know what you mean.
You know who called that out? It was Steve Pizzala.
What?
Who was pollster, was great about this. Again, back to borderline innumeracy of the New York Times, as Josh Marshall points out. With 22% of Democratic primary votes counted, the uncommitted vote totals in Michigan have far surpassed the numbers it received in the party's last 3 presidential primaries, when uncommitted garnered around 20,000 votes.
Well, yeah.
And this year it got 100,000. But, again, missing the point that Biden's numbers changed dramatically. And I actually have those because I wanted to present them to you.
Oh, okay.
In 2012, Barack Obama got 174,000 votes in the 2012 uncontested Michigan Democratic primary. Okay. Uncommitted got 20,000 votes, or 11%. Okay. Obama, 174,000 votes. Biden in 2024, 617,728 votes.
Now, as numbers
go, Obama's 174,000.
That sounds like I didn't do the math yet.
Right.
But
here's
still,
the thing.
Yes.
So what math do you want to do?
Subtraction, I think.
Division.
Division.
See, this is why Steve Casale was so good.
Okay.
What does 617,000 mean compared to the total? In 2012, the total is 194,000.
I see.
In 2024, the total is 761,000. So Biden had hundreds of thousands more votes than Obama. And yet, if you divide it by the total reported, stay with me for the arithmetic.
Okay.
Biden gets 81%.
Yeah.
Obama got 89%. Who did better?
Okay.
Did Obama do better because his percentage was higher, or did Biden do better because he got like 450,000 more votes? Tell me that.
That I don't. Yeah. Okay. I'm sticking with subtraction, and then the answer is Biden.
I'm sticking with division. Obama did better because he got 89 to Biden's 81.
He didn't. All right. He did.
Okay. So Steve Kozala says, politics is the search for the right denominator.
Okay.
And he's right. What does the total for uncommitted mean? It depends upon the total number of votes, not comparing it to what it got in 2012.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, that's an odd metric anyway, since uncommitted means something completely different to the people
uncommitted means something completely different this time, too. So,
yes, right.
I mean, even within today's vote, it means something completely different. So let's go over that.
Well,
so the point is, Obama got 11% uncommitted because people vote uncommitted for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
Okay. And uncommitted got 13.3% of the vote this time. Not very different. A lot more votes, but not very different in regard to percentage. Okay. And who are the uncommitted? They basically fall into three camps, and for some God unknown reason, this is the only primary we've had so far with no exit polls, so nobody knows.
Oh. That's not
rant
great.
For the day. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So uncommitted could be the abandoned Biden faction. That was the name of the pro-Palestinian group that said don't ever vote for him even in November.
I see.
Then there was Listen to Michigan, which was a pro-ceasefire group, which said we're not abandoning him. We want to push him in the FDR style of I agree with you, now make me do it. We're trying to make him do it.
All right.
Okay. And then Upper Peninsula, which is very conservative. It's so conservative that Dean Phillips beat Marianne Williamson there.
Wow.
In most of the counties when you look at that. Okay. So right. Upper Peninsula, which is not exactly a hotbed of pro-Gaza activity.
Gaza, even. Yes. Okay.
Gaza. It's not exactly a hotbed of agree with the college campuses. They had approximately 11 to 13% uncommitted. Why did they do it?
Why?
I suggest we don't know because we don't have exit polls. And enterprising reporters are not up in the Upper Peninsula in the diners asking them.
Wow.
But I suspect...
What the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
You're supposed to go out and ask people so they know what's going on. And I think it happens to be he's too old and he eats ice cream vote.
Yeah, that's maybe... yeah, I mean, I guess there's no way of knowing. I can't believe nobody asked.
There's no way of knowing. So what did the uncommitted really mean? We don't know. We do know it wasn't that much more.
It's almost like they didn't want to know.
Let's just say that the percentage higher...
I don't want to know, actually. Yeah.
...than 2012 doesn't necessarily justify all the attention.
So what math is that?
The math of narrative.
Oh.
And you could tell that from the New York Times because people challenge them online and say, why do you keep saying Biden struggles with 81, but he got about what the polls were expecting and not too much different than uncommitted usually votes, whereas Trump underperformed significantly, and you say Trump had a strong... Well, why do you say that? And the Times reporters actually answered that online, and they said, well, it's a matter of expectations. Which is a fancy way of saying we wrote our own goddamn narrative, and now you're asking us to change it, and we're not going to.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else it could mean. How did they thought Trump was going to do worse than he did?
Well, they're talking about the Biden side, as always. They're not even looking at the Trump side.
I guess.
And why? Because Kyle Kondik is right. The primaries are over. They're boring. They need something to talk to people about. And, and let me be clear, and I think Lawrence O'Donnell was very clear last night about it, probably the only one on cable news who was.
All right.
Biden needs to acknowledge that this was a very important and heartfelt protest vote, which nonetheless is a challenge, not a threat.
Sure. I'll agree with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
People should challenge him. It's the primary season. That's what you're supposed to do. They're letting him know, if you want our vote, you have to come and win it. Fine. That's his job. He ought to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that he's struggling. It doesn't mean that he's in trouble. It doesn't mean anything about what happens in November, because you don't know who those folks are, and you don't know how they're going to vote. You know who some of them are by anecdote and by interview, but you don't know by numbers because you don't know the denominator.
Right. And there's no real way to, there's no real way to make sure that someone who says they're in the abandoned Biden camp really is, or that someone who's in the, I forget what the other one was, the ceasefire group that isn't going to change their mind and go, listen to Michigan, who's going to turn into a listen to parents voter and vote for Trump. I don't know.
What if it's 1 to 3? And by the way, speaking of parents voter, everybody, hones in on the city of Dearborn.
Okay.
Some really interesting things happened in Dearborn. Dearborn was uncommitted beat Biden.
Yes.
But the early vote
the organizing was happening.
Was like 75-25. And the final in Dearborn was closer to like 54, whatever it was, 46 or, something along those lines.
Or fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could have been that. Well, that's what was the heart of the organizing, and the organizers, were out early and moved the early vote, and then the people they didn't reach, who voted on election day, said, "I wasn't listening to you anyway." And
some smart observer was watching online and said, "Look at this! Look at the vibes change.
It's rigged."
When the early vote came out, and it was, it was like, "Oh my God." Statewide, we're going to get 20% protest vote. That would actually be big news if it were that high.
Then, well, it was nearly.
As the same day vote came in, as the election day vote came in and changed that and knocked that down, ultimately getting to like 13.3, then it was, there isn't a single county in Michigan, including Wayne County, where Dearborn is, and Detroit, that hit 20%.
Okay. Well, then, I guess that story is over, and we'll never hear it again.
But, wait, there's more. Oh. You mentioned something about parents.
Yes.
This is a story from 2022. Dearborn parents assail LGBTQ books with sexual themes at school hearing.
They do.
Emotions were raw at Dearborn Public School Board of Ed hearing Thursday as residents debated whether 6 books with sexual or sex abuse themes should be available to students in school libraries.
Okay.
What's my point? My point is that Dearborn is and has always been a very socially conservative area with a lot of Republicans.
Okay. We don't know whether they voted in the other primary or not, but it's a socially conservative. That's true, and well, I guess it's true. I don't know. You just said it was true, and that's what I'm going with.
Well, Susan Demis from Michigan Advance, who knows a lot more about the state than I do, said any analysis of the Arab American vote in Michigan in 2024 that ignores a significant shift from Democrats to the GOP in 2022 over opposition to abortion and opposition to LGBTQ rights is incomplete.
Wrong. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a thing to think about too, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not serious about
exactly,
the thing they were actually protesting, but it does also mean, well, they may not have been. If you're worried about, well, will they withhold their votes in November? Well, they may already have been.
That's the point.
They may already have decided to do that based on something completely different.
Right.
And it's going to undo. By the way,
Biden fails to win over Republican voters in Dearborn. It's a very sexy headline, but you know what?
Yeah, there it is. Okay. Well, it's good to straighten these things out, right? You take one story and you come to some conclusion about a county.
Again, as Lawrence O'Donnell said, it's significant. Biden needs to listen to this. The Listen to Michigan people had it right in their title.
Okay.
The abandoned Biden people probably had it wrong in their title. I think those are probably the hardcore Republicans.
Yeah, well, that does seem like, well, okay, I'll ignore you. I can't help it.
And we don't know anything about the ice cream vote.
Yeah. Ooh, right.
or the union vote, or a whole bunch of other things that matter. So therefore, in the end,
and they didn't
what
ask
does the Michigan primary say about the general election? Almost nothing.
And what did they ask about it? And the answer to that is nothing.
Does this tell us how things are going to go in November? No. Well, then if it doesn't, how do you know Biden's in trouble? Vibes.
Yeah, I guess because we printed it. That's why. Yeah. What else do you want to know?
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. I think that seems reasonable. And we also come away with that lesson again that I keep pointing back to the Loudoun County lesson. Sometimes you get a narrative about an area.
Yes, Loudoun County is a perfect example.
And you think, well, I know and understand the politics of that area based on one headline. And then it turns out to be the opposite or nuanced or some of both. So, yeah, right. Comes up.
So, as he describes himself, recovering political pollster Adam Carlson says, uncommitted getting 12 to 14% is the purgatory nightmare outcome for horrible takes on both sides.
Oh, well, all right. We're primed for it then.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Well, they've got a week to do. When's the next set of primaries that don't matter very much?
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, we got to do all Tuesdays at this point? Yeah, When's the Super Tuesday thing? I don't even.
I should ask Siri.
Okay, you can go ahead and do that. Normally, I think I would know by now. People would be talking about it because they'd be looking forward to it excitedly because a question of who was going to be on the ballot in November might be settled. But since that was already settled, no one cares and no one knows when Super Tuesday is. And
March 5th.
Okay, so that's right away. Next Tuesday. Well, right, a week from now. 6 days.
We'll do the courts after the break. There's a lot of interesting stuff there, too.
All right. Take care of the Article 3 after this. There was Article 2 preliminaries first, and then, so door number 2. Now door number 3, which wasn't even offered before. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Lots of interesting discussion, some breaking news happening. Where do we want to go to next?
Well, we'll just
go to the breaking news or
deal with it later.
Okay.
Lauren Boebert's son was busted in a crime wave.
Awesome. That's the best way to get busted. Don't just
arrested Tuesday and now faces 22 charges relating to an alleged crime wave in Colorado.
Ooh.
Tyler Boebert was taken into custody after a recent string of vehicle trespass and property in a town in Colorado named, wait for it, Rifle.
Woo-wee. How come he didn't get shot? Where were the people, the good guys with guns?
Well, his mother currently represents the district, and I'll just leave that for you later. But there it is.
Okay.
So that I guess would fit in with the court theme a little. Yeah.
Only 22 charges. He's gonna have to settle for the vice president.
Well, they picked him up before he got to 91, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So VP then.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. I still think that Trump hasn't settled on who his VP is. For
strong contender here.
Political purposes and trying to pick up votes, he probably is being told to get Tim Scott. All right? He probably doesn't want Tim Scott. He probably wants Kristi Noem or
Alina Baba, his daughter.
No, he wants somebody who is physically attractive.
Sure, of course. Absolutely.
And so, that's why he's struggling.
Yeah.
He can't decide.
And he can't see, so he's not sure.
Well, he not very good at making decisions either. So,
Right.
That's another story. It's the people around him. And again, we always say this, it's not Trump. Trump's an idiot. It's the people around him that you should get the most angry with and you should fear the most.
Yes.
Because if they get into power, they're bad people and far more competent than Trump ever was.
Sure. That's why I'm for alligator pits.
Yeah. Well, anyway, back in the courts. We talked about
due process.
We talked about Michigan a little bit and Christine Caramo, but I guess the big story in the courts was the one day at a time, rest of our lives, General Hospital stuff from Fulton County in Georgia.
Okay.
And I don't know if everybody's like totally familiar with what's going on. Fani Willis, of course, is trying to prosecute after indicting a whole bunch of Trump people, including Trump, for RICO violations in Georgia because he tried to influence the 2020 election in a corrupt manner.
Yes. So
and it wasn't just Trump the way Jack Smith is doing it. It's also Ken Chesbrough and a host of others.
Yes, he's been looking worse lately.
So one of the people that was in that indictment was a fellow named Mike Roman. You may remember Mike Roman. The name may sound familiar because he's a political operative, a vicious political operative. Sure. But he was one of the people we thought might be co-conspirator number 6.
Right. But he was out-vicioused by another guy.
Yeah, maybe. It's still not clear because I don't know that that's ever really been named yet.
Well, no.
So he's a less likely, but still a possible number 6 indicted person, but definitely indicted in Georgia.
Okay.
Mike Roman doesn't like being indicted, and so he decides that his attorney heard some gossip. And the gossip came from a fellow that Fani Willis hired to be a special prosecutor. His name is Nathan Wade.
Yes.
So, Mike Roman's lawyer on the Trump side hears gossip that Willis and Nathan Wade are having an affair.
All right. I mean,
what's this got to do with the law and prosecuting Trump? Nothing, but wait.
Okay.
So, the idea is, what if Willis hired Nathan Wade and was in a situation where the two were profiting somehow from this hire, since they're having an affair? Does that disqualify Fani Willis under Georgia law for somehow being tainted?
We're not sure.
In some fashion. We're not sure.
We're not 100% sure what you're saying.
So let's make the accusation.
Yeah, right, okay. I see the we don't know if this means anything, but it will be a huge distraction.
We don't know if it means anything, but we're going to make it public.
Sure.
And we're going to challenge her in court, and we're going to convince the judge to have a hearing about it, and so they have a hearing about it. That's where Fani Willis was on the stand.
Yeah. And
saying, I had a romantic relationship with him that started after I hired him, and it is now over. A man is not a plan. I pay a lot of stuff in cash, so you're not going to find a whole lot of records, and there's nothing to this. And that's the end.
Is not a plan on paying cash. All right, I heard all of those things, and I knew that they were coming. I didn't know that a man is not a plan was coming from there.
Yeah.
I know a canal is not a Panama. That I remember.
So...
What?
And I heard Trump about the lawyer said, we got some information here. And how did they get that information in the first place? Nathan Wade, the special prosecutor who was having an affair with Fani Willis, got divorced.
Okay.
So the first set of speculation is, well, maybe that Fani Willis affair was why he got divorced. That happened before he hired. And if we can prove that this happened before he hired, we can prove Fani Willis is lying. And if Fani Willis is lying, then she ought not to be on this case, because how could you have Trump prosecuted by a known liar?
Oh, that's exactly who you should have prosecuting him, I think. Fight fire with fire.
Okay. So they subpoena the court records. They subpoena the divorce stuff. There's nothing there.
Oh. All right. That's
so good. Then they go and subpoena cell phone records and find that Willis and Nathan Wade talked to each other a whole lot. Are you finding none of this particularly compelling?
I mean, in terms of what to do about it, yeah.
It's salacious, but not compelling in terms of what to do with it.
Okay.
So then they go further and say, all right, we got to get to the source of this. It turns out that we found out about Nathan Wade's affair with Fani Willis because Nathan Wade's divorce lawyer, I think his name is Terrell Bradley, was the one who told us. Terrell Bradley texted the lawyer representing Mike Roman with gossip about this happening.
Now I do know what to do.
So they said, okay, he's a star witness. If we can get him on the stand and he can testify that he knew about this affair and put a date on it, then we can prove that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade were lying about what they were doing.
Right. I'll get to that immediately after I disbar this divorce attorney. Yes.
Well, that may be the end of it, the end result. So they say he's the star witness. He's the key to the whole thing. Early on in the hearing, they asked him to testify, and he said, I can't do that. I'm a lawyer, and I was his divorce lawyer, and it's like protected,
Yeah. I mean, he's saying, I shouldn't have told you also.
Well, that's what he's saying now.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah.
But no, he never should have told you, but I can't talk about it because confidential and, a lawyer-client relationship, whatever the fancy lawyer term is
privilege. For it. The lawyer-client relationship was what the other two were having.
Right. So, no, it was a lawyer-lawyer relationship.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yes, those are bad, too.
The defense for Trump, which is to say the defense for Mike Roman, the lawyer says, well, we're going to have him on the stand, and we're going to go through a whole bunch of hoops, and we're going to get the Georgia Bar Association to say that this isn't related to confidentiality, and we're going to have him on the stand. He's our star witness. He'll tell the truth, and we'll see what's going on. So they finally get him on the stand yesterday, and everybody's watching. And the lawyers for the Trump side said, you're the one that told me about this affair. When did you know about it? And here's the big bombshell.
Yeah.
He says, I don't remember. And the lawyer for Trump says, what do you mean you don't remember? You told us that this happened. Why did you tell? Did you know that this happened? Did you have information? How did you find out this happened? And the guy on the stand says, well, I was just speculating.
What? Oh, nice. All right.
Now the Trump lawyers are really angry, and they start screaming at him.
You're ruining
Are you
our
here to tell
testimony.
me that you don't remember? You're lying. You're making all of this stuff up. And the guy's basically saying, look, I'm here on the stand under oath telling you I made this stuff up. Why are you yelling at me?
That's a good one. And by the way, can we get, is this a federal court? No, this is a state court. Can take, I want the audio.
So it's all on tape.
I want the audio recording of it.
There's video.
Oh, excellent.
Of the Trump lawyers getting really upset with him. And there's video of the guy. And actually have it in the pundit roundup.
All right. Well, I'd like to see that, but what really I'd like to do is use it for the prosecution when the Trump defendants are on the stand and all say, I don't remember. I made it all up. And, we can say, remember how outrageous you thought that was a few weeks ago? Here's videotape of your lawyers exploding, screaming that wasn't a valid answer. And, all right, well. Anyway, I'm sure the hypocrisy will bother them deeply.
Yeah. Well, I sent you the video, and cool. I don't know if you could actually
I don't know if I could either.
It's 2 minutes and 14
but,
seconds, you can decide for tomorrow.
Okay.
But I'm just telling you what happened, just like I told you what happened with the other video. And it's just really dramatic. And so there's this if you're old, like me.
I am. Sure.
You'll remember Bugs Bunny.
I do. Right?
You may remember a wartime Bugs Bunny where he's trying to help out the war effort, and his job is to take a mallet and hit the bombs on the conveyor belt in front of him.
Yes.
And if they don't go off, he, with a crayon, writes "dud."
Yes. This I do remember this.
That was the video that was playing after this testimony.
I guess so. As opposed to Bugs Bunny moving up and sawing off Georgia as well. That's another possibility. All right. Well, Bugs Bunny knew what he was talking about. I was thinking about also the one where where the gangsters are hiding in the oven.
Yes. In any case.
Yes.
So AJC Politics has losing the forest for the trees in the Fulton County Trump case. That's what happened yesterday.
Holy moly.
And so to finish up the factual part of it, so this was a big nothing burger.
All right.
And people have pointed out that if you ever open up a hamburger stand or a restaurant in Washington, D.C., you should name it Nothing Burger.
Good idea. True.
Because Nothing Burger comes up all the time in Washington.
That's right. And people are obsessed with them.
But Fani Willis opened the door to questions about her judgment with her own conduct, but it's crucial not to lose sight of what is in the public interest versus what's simply of interest to the public. As salacious as the details of the Willis affair are, defense attorneys haven't shown they're anything more than a distraction from the cases against their clients.
Yes, so far.
If Willis is somehow replaced by another DA, rest assured Trump's team will come for them too. So that's basically what's going on. Now, the next step is Friday. I think that the judge, McAfee, will have a administrative hearing to wrap all of this stuff up. And then he makes a decision next week. I don't think she's going to be disqualified because she hasn't done anything wrong according to Georgia law. It just looks bad.
Oh.
The question is just looking bad enough to get her off the case? And I don't know. I doubt it.
Good addition.
The lawyers in Georgia don't seem to think so. They seem to think she ought to recuse herself because it doesn't look bad. But it's not like the judge is going to say you have to leave. But it's a judge. Judges have incredible amounts of power in this kind of situation.
True.
And they can decide whatever they want to decide. So bottom line is we won't find out till next week what really happens. But next week isn't all that far away, just like Super Tuesday isn't all that far away.
Right. And March isn't all that far away. It's very close. So that'll be very interesting. I hope that was an adequate summary of what happened. Again, I am not a lawyer. I'm just trying to tell you what I saw. I thought it described things very well. I'm not certain I have a preference for how this comes out. I'm just sort of thinking, on the one hand, I don't want them to get anywhere by having offered this stupid distraction that has nothing to do with anything and just try to smear the prosecutor and delay. Because at the end of the day, all they really are interested in, it doesn't matter what happens to the prosecutor. They won a big delay in the trial and made bad headlines for someone other than them. So that's, I think, all they really had in mind. On the other hand, if they were to, I guess, quote unquote, succeed in this and have the judge insist that a new prosecutor be brought in, what does the Trump team plan when they bring in some serious heavy hitter with no baggage and say, all right, I've read this brief. I know I can prosecute this case. It really doesn't matter. Fani Willis didn't have to do it. She could have assigned the work to somebody else once the indictment is done. She's approved the indictment. Done.
She did. She assigned it to Nathan Wade.
Right, for one thing. True. So, suppose they bring in somebody who's, got a sterling reputation and then prosecutes the case and wins. Then what? I think we would rather have had Fani Willis. Then we could at least say, make fun of her and laugh about salacious stories as she sentenced us to prison.
Well,
now we
there's
just
another side to it, of course, in the sense that this is an elected position. Fani Willis is running for re-election.
Oh, okay. Well, there's that. They can punish her with that.
I have to tell you, I'm not in Georgia. I don't care. Question is, did all of this hurt her re-election chances? My gut feeling is probably not, because she was really feisty, and the people who vote for her like that kind of thing.
Yes, and probably not going to be terribly.
And by the way, what if she stays on the case, and what if she wins her case? That's a pretty good, argument for re-election.
Yeah, and so that may be all.
I wish that all of this stuff and still got it done. Don't you want me?
Yeah, why not? This is that's true. I mean, maybe the thing Trump is going for, besides, he's always primarily interested in delay and distraction.
Yes, that's the main thing.
He loves to punish people by saying he's going to make them lose their elected position as well. He thinks that's a big threat.
Which reminds me, since you mentioned that, is I do have something from
I was lying that time. Yes.
Michigan.
Oh, more Michigan.
Well, it was another video here, which you probably don't want to play on the air. But I'm quoting.
Really do.
I just want you to know in advance I'm quoting.
All right. Okay.
They asked the Michigan voter, who are you going to vote for? And she basically said, not Trump. And the reporter said, why? And the Michigan voter on Trump, this is a direct quote, I think he's pretty much an asshole.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not so bad. I think you might even be able to get away with that one on TV these days.
Yeah.
And in fact, I guess they did, if you have the tape.
Well, it was on TV.
There you go. All right.
So let's see.
Can't tell anymore.
I was on Lawrence O'Donnell.
Well, what is he? MSNBC. So who knows? The
this
cable
is
shows
this
could
is
be
a 54-second clip. So if you like to play those things.
Yeah, or I could just play the censoring horn and say you all missed something very exciting there. It's hard to tell these days. Most people, if you have any of the cable systems or satellite systems, that all the broadcast channels and the cable channels are mixed, and the cable channels will put anything on these days, as it turns out.
Yes, but if you say that sort of thing, you might get your cable channel banned in Loudoun County because, the kids shouldn't be hearing this.
Right, or for that matter, Dearborn.
So a lot going on.
Okay, cool. That's quite a story. I guess I'm glad we got a chance to catch up on the Fulton County thing because it's been bubbling over for 2 weeks, and I've kind of ignored it because that can't be the most important thing happening. But
it's not, but I think people should at least get an idea of what's going on. And again, if you want to really follow what's going on from people who know what they're talking about, you can follow Anthony Michael Crease on Twitter. You can look at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Yes.
You can follow people who actually know what they're talking about, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, at this point, if nothing else, you might be wondering, why isn't this case proceeding? I thought that this was a trial that was underway, and it's like 2 weeks I haven't heard anything. And the answer is
they had to settle this first. Which,
it was interlocutory.
I was going to say that.
Oh.
The word I learned. I wasn't going to pronounce it right, but I was going to say it.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm sorry I stepped on it.
No, you didn't step on it. I'm just telling you all the sorts of stuff that I have learned.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad we're all having a learning experience about this. Pay for things in cash and interlocutory.
Yes.
Good.
Cash money. You got to pay cash money for it.
It's a good idea, honestly. So they were going to trace her movements around town, and she defeated that. Well,
it's a thing.
Or something.
In the black community, to pay for cash with cash means you don't have to deal with, I am going to challenge your checks. And I'm not going to accept your credit card.
Yeah,
that you couldn't get because
no one can deny
you have
this
one, and you can't get one. So it's a thing, and so if you don't understand it, don't even talk about it.
Okay, I thought it was I just don't want people prying into my business, but that's why white people use cash.
Yeah, exactly.
I got it. Okay,
not the same thing.
I'm hiding from the government.
Right.
You're
it's
white.
Like when white people have the talk with their kids, it's about birth control, and when black people have a talk with their kids, it's like when a cop pulls you over, this is how you behave.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good and important distinction to make. And true. Yeah. I mean, because white lawyers questioning her about this would have a very different view of what she was doing.
Exactly right, and that's what happened.
All right.
And so, the whole trial was really interesting optics.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not so worried about her reelection. But
that's
not really my concern anyway.
It's
my
actually
concern
a good
is that she
follow-up
prosecute the RICO charge against the people who committed a crime.
That's right. All right. Very, very interesting. Good. I learned something, too, from this interlocutory jaunt.
Right. Now, a trip down memory lane by Aaron Blake from the Washington Post said, hey, remember that uncommitted vote?
Yes, I do, from earlier today.
Right, from earlier in the show. And you remember the Obama uncommitted vote of 11% back in 2012?
Yes, it was actually smaller.
Well, he said, you know what else happened in 2012? And then he pulls this story from the Washington Post. 2012, May 9th, 2012. Why felon Keith Judd did so well against Obama in West Virginia. You remember this? Keith Judd, who was serving a 17-and-a-half-year-old prison sentence for extortion, took 41% of the vote in West Virginia's Democratic primary. 72,000 votes to Obama's 106,000.
Okay. I don't know. Now it's starting to ring a bell, but that was long forgotten.
For convention delegates if anybody had signed up to be a Judd delegate, but nobody did.
Oh. Well, with good reason.
right? How did Judd get so many votes? It's likely not his past careers as a superhero and religious leader or his passionate FEC report. Simply put, West Virginia doesn't like Obama.
I guess.
For reasons.
When it wasn't self-executing to keep him off the ballot, as it turns out.
Yeah.
But that's only because no one knew who he was.
Right.
If I did, I would have executed that. Not him, the law.
Right. And then Aaron Blake goes on to say, notable uncommitted, no preference vote shares from Obama's uncontested 2012 primaries. Kentucky, 42%. North Carolina, 21%. Rhode Island, 14%. Tennessee, 12%. Maryland, 11.5%. Michigan, 11%. Massachusetts, 11%. Uncommitted or no preference is a thing that people vote in primaries. They just do.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's their way of saying, I don't know, I was for this other person who wasn't going to win. I'm not ready to come to this person yet. It's only February or March or whatever. And so I'm voting either uncommitted. But as people have pointed out, people who bother to come out and vote uncommitted are not apathetic, disengaged voters.
That's true.
You can get them.
Yeah.
You can work on them. You have material to work with.
That's what a convention is.
They're not the same thing as I'm not even registered. I don't vote.
That's true, and they took the time to do that, and they sent. I mean, there are also uncommitted delegates who end up there, but yeah, I guess that's why. Well, for one thing, that's why you don't want to have a closed-door brokered convention either. The convention is the big show that converts everybody from uncommitted to at least, all right, I'll show up in November.
You're saying, on the one hand, Ezra Klein's idea about replacing Biden with a closed convention, or the no labels way of picking their candidate, which they haven't done yet, which is to not tell us how they do it, but have some sort of convention with the big wigs at no labels deciding. You're saying that's not the best idea?
I'm saying yes. Well, that's certainly true, and yeah, certainly if you're going to, but I'm at least saying. To sort of reinforce what you were saying there, that the people who would bother to come out and vote uncommitted when they could just stay home are people who are looking for either to make a statement right now or saying, all right, well, convince me. And if you don't take the opportunity come August, September to do the big rally and the glowing bio videos and the stories of the horrors that the other side will bring you, then you don't get them on board necessarily. You don't motivate them to. Those productions are all about bringing everybody back and reminding them why they were so interested that they left their houses in March to vote for nobody in particular. Why did I do that again? Here's the answer.
Right. Now, if you're Palestinian, I can totally understand why you might be a one-issue voter.
Yeah. Sure.
If you are not Palestinian, I'm not sure that's true.
It's
an issue.
Now,
but what if there's a ceasebare? It matters now,
but
I don't know
what happens to you, but yes.
It matters now, but what about IVF? And by the way, Republicans are so backpedaling so fast, they look like I don't know, Wile E. Coyote going over the cliff. I don't know what you can compare them to. In Alabama, they're talking about the possibility of passing a law suspending the ruling from the Supreme Court, but only until after the election.
When it won't matter anymore. Yeah, the Republicans are really scrambling on that.
Anybody. I mean, I don't even know what they're thinking. They're so desperate.
Just whatever works.
They have to come up with something.
Yeah, no, that's really a great illustration of their desperation. And, I mean, it's pretty clear that the Republicans, strategy makers have instructed all candidates, you need to go out there and say that you're okay with IVF and that you're going to protect IVF. You
do that by blocking Tammy Duckworth in the Senate from passing a Protect IVF bill, which happened yesterday.
Yes, you can't allow anybody else to protect IVF. Because if you do, then you're not the one protecting IVF. They are. So you can't have that. And what they're running into is a lot of Republicans who are being urged, you got to go out there. And they go and they listen and they go out and they say, I'm for protecting IVF. And the local reporters say things in some cases like, I I don't mean to be rude here, but you have a pending in this Congress bill to ban IVF. Why are you saying you're pro-IVF? And the answer is,
for the same reason that I excoriated the infrastructure bill, and now I'm taking credit for the road in my
sort of, yeah. And in many cases, though, the only possible answer is, you want to hear the truth is I am against IVF, but I was advised that was bad, so I am telling you until the election that I am pro-IVF, after which I will switch and ban IVF. Is that a good answer? Do you understand where I'm coming from now?
I'm pro-IVF. I'm just against infanticide.
IVF. Yes, right.
So are you saying that anybody getting IVF who winds up discarding embryos is guilty of murder?
I am saying that.
Because if you are, that's what Alabama said.
Right.
They didn't ban IVF. Yes. What they did is they said that if you discard embryos, you're potentially guilty of murder, and therefore no clinic is going to store embryos.
Right.
What happens if a woman
murders in waiting
decides that, okay, I had a successful pregnancy, you can get rid of all the other embryos you have?
Then
is the clinic now obligated to store them until 3027?
Yes, that is the expiration date of all embryos.
So, what are you talking about? And if you ask a normal Republican, they'll say this doesn't make any sense. Right. If you ask an elected Republican,
they'll say those are babies.
Say what you said, which is to say, well, I'm for protection today.
Yes,
that's what I'm told that I'm going to read from a card.
Yeah,
note card like Biden does.
I love IVF.
Am for protecting IVF.
Right.
And that's my statement, and you can call my office if you have any questions about the bill I'm currently supporting.
Which bans it. But okay, yeah, that's
and if you're Tommy Tuberville, you said IVF. Is that like the ivermectin Voters for Freedom? I mean, what?
He may think so. He thinks it's a football play, but he's among them. Right. He's one of the leaders in that brand of politics.
Anyway, the point being, are you a one-issue voter? No. Is that your issue? Or are you a multi-issue voter? And, the Gaza thing is going to fit into the big picture depending upon how things are when the election comes around.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. You heard the escape noise as Greg made his exit there. And, we had a little extra to try to squeeze in, which our automated break made it impossible for those of you listening to the live stream to hear. But you can wait for the podcast version of this, and you who are listening to the podcast version only will not, you'll recognize by the fact that he's speaking over the music and that the break is oddly timed, that he had a little something extra to say. And it makes editing for podcasts so exciting, trying to make it sound like we intended to do that so that everybody can hear the things we needed to squeeze in after the auto break. Anyway, essentially it comes down to this. Right, we were talking about which kind of one-issue voter are you? Are you a voter who is voting based on his or her anger over, or non-gender specific anger over IVF, or are you angry about what the IDF is doing? And it's all about the middle consonant to determine what sort of holdout vote you really are. Okay, so we got that taken care of. Plenty of other things to look at. Oh, something else that I should probably find a better source for this. But I happened to come across, there's nothing wrong with this source. It's just that it's not local. It's a Michigan story for which I somehow got tipped to a story in the Seattle Times, which I'm glad they covered it. It's good. It tells you something about the quality of the editor's news eye in the Seattle Times. But I should probably see if I can get a Michigan-based news source for it, and maybe one of the ones that Rosalind McGregor frequently turns to, and I've got a couple here. Now, I've just searched them. We got Bridge, Michigan, which Greg just used earlier in the show, and is a frequent source for Rosalind's stories, but also the Holland Sentinel, which I know is also in the neighborhood there, too. And I don't know, maybe it would be more fun to... anyway, here's the story. As the Seattle Times has it, in their headline, public health officer in Michigan keeps her job after lengthy legal fight over COVID rules. It's an Associated Press story, but happens to be running in the Seattle Times. So it should be, as good as any, I suppose. But like I said, I went on something with a local flavor to it, perhaps. The headlines that I managed to find over at Bridge, Michigan, after high-profile feud, this is what at some point Rosalind told us about. After high-profile feud, Ottawa County health leader to stay put. And then the Holland Sentinel version, Ottawa County Board votes unanimously to retain Hambly as health officer. So, yeah, kind of interesting news from out of Michigan there. What shall we take? The Bridge, Michigan one or the Holland Sentinel? Maybe we'll look at the Holland Sentinel. We haven't used them, I don't think. Maybe in some of Rosalind's. I guess we'll see whether there's any kind of a paywall, but I don't think so. 13 months after the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners, led by a new far-right majority, we know all about them thanks to Rosalind's coverage, after they attempted to fire her, officials have agreed that Adeline Hambly will remain the county's health officer after all. Following a nearly 12-hour closed session on Monday, February 26th, that's just one day before the primaries, commissioners voted 11-0 to keep Hambly and Deputy Health Officer Marcia Mansoray, I don't know if we've had a chance to hear her name before and how it's pronounced, in place as part of a settlement agreement to end Hambly's longstanding lawsuit against the board. Other parts of the agreement, all litigation is dropped, so all worthless, all that money burnt on lawyers. A multi-session termination hearing will end with no determination. A judge will decide how much of Hambly's attorney's fees will be covered, and there will be no monetary award for damages. Should the board attempt to fire Hambly again, they must agree with a public binding 3-person panel with one member selected by Hambly's attorney, one selected by Ottawa County's attorney, which is apparently the Coleman Legal Group. This is the local flavor that you get out of the Holland Sentinel. And an arbitrator, Thomas Behm, B-E-H-M, I don't know. Today, the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners came to a mutual agreement, subject to court approval, to end all litigation involving the health officer. Board Chair Joe Moss posted on social media. What did he use? Facebook. I'm just checking. Gab? I don't know. What do they use? Anyway, all legal issues between the parties will be resolved, and Ms. Hambly will continue in the role as health officer as previously decided by the appeals court. So, that sounds like good news. And, whatever. I don't know. I just thought I would bring that up to speed here. Oh, you know what? There's a little bit more, I think, from this one. Although, let's read on here in the Holland Sentinel. The board will continue to provide oversight of the health department. Oh boy. Prioritizing freedom, of course, naturally, and the individual rights of the people. We will continue to build Ottawa County to be a place where freedom rings. Remember that's their new tagline. And individuals and families thrive insofar as they're able to, survive pandemics. In his own statement, Commissioner Doug Zylstra said the agreement, quote, accomplishes many important goals. This has been a trying period for all involved, and I'm pleased that we can finally get positive resolution to this matter. But, of course, they'll be paying for her attorney's fees. Members of Ottawa Impact, founded by Moss and Vice Chair Sylvia, is it Rodea? I don't know. Anyway, they attempted to demote Hambly, you may remember, to interim health officer shortly after they were sworn in on January 3rd, 2023. They intended to replace her with Nathaniel Kelly, who most recently worked as a health and safety manager at a Grand Rapids area HVAC company. I keep saying HVAC, but I think people who actually work in the business actually say the whole thing out, HVAC. Anyway, Hambly sued in February, kicking off a year of unprecedented strain between the board and the county's health department. In April, a circuit judge granted Hambly a preliminary injunction, allowing her to remain in her role until a trial could take place. However, the Michigan Court of Appeals partially vacated that injunction, saying the board had the legal right to fire Hambly as long as state law was followed. Was it? Don't know. Throughout the summer, the board, Administrator John Gibbs, and Hambly battled over a proposed budget for the department. In the end, the OI majority, Ottawa Impact majority, voted to cut millions. Moss filed notice on September 27th that a termination hearing was planned over allegations of incompetence, misconduct, and neglect of duty, not by him, but he suspects of her. Oh, doesn't really suspect. He just wants to charge it. This all during the budget negotiations. The hearing, the first steps of legally firing a health officer, began in October and has stretched on through several recesses for more than 4 months, which should probably indicate to you they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to follow the rules. They can't get it done. In a November 6th session, the board voted 7-3 to, quote, accept council's recommendation regarding litigation and settlement activities in the case of Hambly versus Ottawa County. Following the meeting, multiple sources close to the matter told the Sentinel the agreement included paying Hambly $4 million to resign, plus the resignation of Mansoray. Following reports of the settlement amount, Ottawa Impact commissioners attempted to walk back the agreement. As recently as February 22nd, Moss referred to the settlement and dollar figure as a false narrative. How do you like that? And yet, for some strange reason, he was willing to vote with the entirety of the board to drop the whole matter and agree to pay all of her attorney's fees. It's not because we were otherwise going to have to pay her $4 million, but, reasons. Hambly filed a motion in court to see the settlement enforced. But during an evidentiary hearing in January, Muskegon County 14th Circuit Court Judge Jenny McNeil found, although an agreement was discussed, the public vote wasn't clear enough to be legally binding. Hambly's attorney, Sarah Riley Howard, and representatives from Coleman have since disputed what was actually said in the hearing. How could you have such a dispute? I don't know. Which was closed to the public. The Sentinel filed a motion on February 7th to have the transcript of the hearing released to the public. How do you like that? The Sentinel being the Holland Sentinel, the paper we're reading right now. That motion, just to complicate things even further, along with several from Howard, were scheduled for a hearing at 1:30 p.m. Wednesday, February 28th, tomorrow, in Muskegon. I don't know whether this settlement means that will or won't go forward. I don't see why the Holland Sentinel wouldn't want to see what was involved in the hearing anyway. So very interesting, and more twists and turns, and how litigation can take different directions very easily, and the whole process can be hijacked, delayed, and turned into something it was never intended to be very easily, just like what was happening in Fulton County, Georgia. So there you go. Speaking of pronunciations, as we were the other day, up in New Hampshire, the former Senate candidate turned Pittsfield, New Hampshire police officer pronounces his name as Bolduc. No Bolduc. It's not, they don't retain any Central European or Slavic pronunciation of it. I don't know if that's the origin of it or not, but anyway, I took a look at some of his appearances and TV ads, and he just says Bolduc, which should just be, anglicization of Bolduc, but that's the way he pronounces it. And as you know, it's very important to him to be able to have things for him to be able to identify as he sees fit. But screw your pronouns. Thank you. All right. Now, on to other items on today's agenda. Just thought a tip of the hat to Rosalind McGregor, and the Michigan scene was in order. Let's see. Well, that one I can save for later, because another weird, unbelievable one-off story, I guess, to add to the the pile alongside the New Mexico teacher and the sword fighting going on in chemistry class. But we'll put that one aside for now. Although now I feel like I've made the transition to it. But okay, no. Something more important, or at least, clearly not more important, because it happened and we missed it. And we must have thought nothing of it at the time. But just to add to Trump's legal and fiscal woes, some other settlement that we missed along the way, but I'll update you on. This story published on Monday, but I think we may have missed it when it actually happened. Is this look back to Trump actually pays, like it's more than he was sentenced, to have to make this payment. He actually did it. Pays $392,000 in legal fees to the New York Times, of all places. So you don't even have to subscribe now. They're fine. They just got $392,000, which I guess management will keep as a bonus to themselves, after a failed lawsuit over disclosure of Trump's tax documents. This goes back a ways. John Passantino is reporting this for CNN. It's in their business section, I guess, for some reason. Donald Trump has paid $392,000 to the New York Times, not for a subscription, but to cover the legal costs from his failed lawsuit against the newspaper and its journalists over a 2018 investigation into his finances that included confidential tax records, a spokesman for the Times told CNN on Monday. And I don't know whether anybody acknowledges a link between that reporting and the now successful litigation charging that his financial empire was all built on fraud, but I don't know. I mean, clearly the connection is there. So, of course, everybody kind of always agreed that Trump was a fraudster and that his financial empire was built on fraud. But then the New York Times published a story saying, well, we've seen at least part of his tax filings, and we can detail for you that this has been an ongoing tax fraud at a minimum. And then presumably a fraud in other areas as well. And now that Judge Engoron has conducted his trial, it turns out to be true that the rest of the business was a fraud too. But on a tax-paying basis, it was a fraud, and that was established by the New York Times in 2018. And of course, that having been the case, Trump sued them because he threatens to sue everybody, and he thinks that makes him look very strongly strong to threaten people in court. Even though, look, the cat's out of the bag. You're a fraudster, and we all know it, and you're not going to get anywhere, and it's going to end up costing you more money. But he thought money was no object, but now he's finding out that it actually is. Anyway, Trump was ordered to pay the money in January, more than 8 months after Judge Robert R. Reed granted the Times' motion to dismiss the case against it and its journalists, concluding that the journalists' conduct was protected by the New York Constitution. And I'm sure the federal Constitution as well, but that didn't come into play because it was a state case. But, to me, I guess takeaway from that paragraph is he sued in 2018. Everybody knew it was going to be a washout because, the paper's ability to report this is going to be protected. You haven't got a leg to stand on. And sure enough, January, so like 9 months ago, the judge said, there's nothing to this. I'm dismissing the case and you've got to pay their attorney's fees. Now, months later, 8 months after that, he still hadn't paid. So they had to go back to court, I guess, and say, Judge, what happened? We were going to get paid $392,000 in legal fees. All right, fine. I guess I actually have to order you directly now to do that. You are ordered to pay. That's what the whole court proceeding was. That's what I meant when I dismissed the thing and told you that you were supposed to pay the legal fees. Now I have to specifically order. And that's what Trump does, right? He's handed an order that everybody else understands to mean he has to pay $392,000, and he sits on it for 8 months and says, I don't know, what do you mean? Who says? You said some guy named Donald Trump. That's not me. I'm Barron. I'm John Barron, right? Okay, fine. You specifically have to pay. And that was in January. And now it's the end of February. He finally paid this. But he did pay, I think. I mean, it says so, right? Among the claims that Trump brought against the Times was the accusation that the journalists were liable for tortious interference in how they allegedly sought out his niece, right, Mary Trump, and caused her to allegedly breach a 2001 settlement contract with the Trump family. CNN previously reported. I guess they signed her to something akin to an NDA, his dumb NDAs that he thinks is going to protect him all the time. And she said, to hell with that. I'm talking anyway. Either whether it's valid or not, or maybe she's challenging the validity in court. Anyway, the point is, he was saying, Trump's claim was, when the New York Times asked her to talk, and she did, she broke her contract with us. Yeah, so who cares? Oh, well, I'm charging you with tortious interference with that contract. But it was her decision to break it, if it was broken at all, if it was ever valid. But he figured, what the hell, I can make legal trouble from that. I'm never going to win, but I want headlines that I'm suing the New York Times because everyone will think that makes me so strongly strong. In fact, of course, that used to be one of the accusations that they made against Democrats all the time. As Democrats, they can never accept anything. They always are constantly suing and boo-hooing to the courts over these things. Remember, in the immediate aftermath of the 2000 election, that was the big charge, when it looked like the Democrats would go to court to try to sort out the election. They were sore loser men. Remember, they came with those signs. They're boo-hooing to the courts. Meanwhile, even in that very election, it was the Bush campaign that was in court all the time, everywhere, far more often than Gore Lieberman. And they actually ended up getting the election handed to them in the courts. And Gore, as vice president, on January 6th, presiding over the counting of the electoral votes, was the one who said, no, for the good of the country, I'm stepping out of the way here. And please don't challenge these electoral votes. Just let them have it already. And let's be good losers and good citizens in the country. And then boohoo. And then now, of course, well, what else? This can't be coming as a surprise to anybody who is watching Trump accept evangelical Christian endorsement after having been caught bribing a porn star to keep her mouth shut about the affair they had. Anyway, back to the story here from New York. Right, so he was claiming tortious interference in his maybe not valid contract with Mary here. The reporting series, authored by David Barstow, Suzanne Craig, and Russ Buettner, went on to win the 2019 Pulitzer Prize in explanatory reporting. I didn't realize that was a category because I pay no attention to the Pulitzer Prizes. Anyway, good category. Last year, not investigative reporting, explanatory reporting. I like that kind. Fox explainers. How come they're not winning? Anyway, last year the judge said he was dismissing the claim against the Times, quote, because the Times' purpose in reporting on a story of high public interest constitutes justification as a matter of law. That's the legalese way of saying, yeah, Trump has no leg to stand on. There's no basis upon which he could or should be suing here. As a matter of law, it says right here, they're allowed to do this. The judge also pointed to recent amendments made to New York's so-called anti-SLAPP law, which provides a mechanism for defendants to seek quick dismissal of lawsuits that target conduct protected by the First Amendment. That is what he was pointing to and explaining why he was ordering that dismissal of the defendants and the payments of their attorney fees. A spokesman for the Times on Monday called the anti-SLAPP statute a powerful force for protecting press freedom. Not that they're going to not go around firing all their journalists because of, oh my God, we're worried about costs these days, even though all our costs were reimbursed. This decision shows that the state's newly amended anti-SLAPP statute can be a powerful force for protecting press freedom. Times spokesman Charlie Statlander has said in a statement, the court has sent a message to those who want to misuse the judicial system to try to silence journalists. CNN has reached out to representatives for Trump for comment, but I guess as of press time, did not get those comments and will likely never get them. So there you go. That seems like an important addition to the landscape in terms of what Trump is facing these days. All right, let's see. Some of these other things that are hiding behind. Hiding behind the pocket labels. Yesterday we were reading the whole K-file piece. Interesting, though, there, now that I think about it. I'm looking at the byline on that again, and Andrew Kaczynski is the K in K-files. Takes only second billing in this. He's generally offered the top billing to M. Steck in this one. This is the story we were reading yesterday in the second and third segments of yesterday's show, just before we spoke with Joan. And there was one last section, and I kind of wanted to get it all on the record just so that we all know all the, we're all working with the same amount of background on what's happening with Ken Chesebro and just how up to his neck and perhaps over his head he is with the lies he told investigators in order to get out of being indicted in a couple of states. But just to review, essentially, he was laundering his craziest legal theories into the Trump circle using a pseudonymous Twitter account and pretending that that wasn't him and telling investigators that that wasn't him all along the way. And now it seems CNN has established that it was, in fact, Ken Chesebro, and his lawyers have acknowledged as much. But the play essentially was I'm not certain what he was telling people at the time, but now he's telling investigators, one, that he has told investigators that he didn't have any other social media presence, but that turns out to have been a lie as well. And the way he was using the social media presence is rather underhanded, right? So that he doesn't run, he thinks, he's hoping so that he doesn't run afoul of legal and ethical obligations to his clients, the Trump campaign at this point, that he's not advising them. As their attorney, I'm not advising you to fake electoral votes or anything like that. I'm simply saying, actually, he was doing that. He said, you should collect those fake electoral votes, but only as a contingency or only on a contingency basis. We're only going to present them to Congress if and when we prevail in some court proceeding such that the results, the electoral college results from that state are thrown into legitimate question. And if they are thrown into question, then we will have these alternative votes to present to Congress, either so that Congress can vote to accept these alternative votes instead of the ones that came originally with the governor's signature. Well, the governor made a terrible mistake, and he or she may or may not have known it at the time, but the judges have straightened it out, or at least told us that we had good reason to believe that the so-called official electoral college votes are not, in fact, official after all, and then, and only then, can you use these fake ones, in which case they're not even all that fake. But since they didn't win any of the cases, they had to come up with a different methodology for introducing these forged electoral college votes. And as it turns out, Chesebro thought he was covering his ass by saying, I'm a lawyer, and when you see me physically and I'm in the room with you, or whether we're doing it via Zoom or whatever, and I'm here in the capacity as Ken Chesebro, your attorney, I'm telling you, don't go any further with these things. It's just too dangerous. It's going to expose you to real liability if you say, we don't need the courts, we don't need the legislatures, we can just have Mike Pence do it, and even if Mike Pence doesn't do it, maybe we can make the Supreme Court do it. That would be too crazy and unethical for me as your lawyer. However, I will say, just in the interest of being thorough, because I don't want to run into ethical complications by not telling you some of the options, I will tell you that this option is very chancy. and might even expose you to liability, but I won't even, probably didn't tell him that. But, anyway, there's this guy out there who has this theory that, I don't know, I mean, maybe you want to consider it. I mean, that's not my recommendation, but yeah, you should maybe take a look at this, and you tell me if you want to try to do this crazy thing. And of course, that crazy thing was him using a sock puppet Twitter account to introduce these concepts. And of course, you know, how many other places and how many other stories have we heard that gatekeeper advisors for Trump were telling people, listen, don't give him hope. Don't tell him. Wasn't it to Cheeseborough, Warren? Wasn't it Cheeseborough we were reading about the other day? But they were saying, don't offer him this alternative because that's going to get his hopes up and then we're never going to be able to get him off of that. I think that's right. One of the last stories we previously read about Cheeseborough, he got that warning. Well, he didn't need that warning. He already knew that that was the case. And that's why he was using this sock puppet to introduce these hopeful ideas. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So I was going to say during the last segment that there was one more piece of the CNN article about the latest one about Cheeseborough, but just to sort of set up where we were, I did a little rewind there. And then some earlier, I guess, who was doing all the reporting that we were reading recently about Cheeseborough? I can't remember. Some of them, I think, are still in pocket because we didn't get all the way through them. And that would answer the question if I can scroll back and find them. But if it doesn't matter that much, although I'd like to be able to give them credit for it. But at any rate, the point is lots of looking back at Cheeseborough and what he was doing that I think will expose him to some considerable liability. Talking Points memo was, yeah, that's right, was the source of the ongoing series of that exposed just how deep in it Cheeseborough really was. But the new news here is how frequently he denied to investigators on penalty of perjury and having his diversions, a diversion of charges against him, was all premised on his cooperation, but he was in fact trying to cover for himself as well. All right, so this last section here was about his theory that Pence could make a unilateral decision about counting the votes, something that he, in talking to investigators, has told them, no, I advised the Trump campaign that couldn't work. But somehow the Trump campaign got this idea. And among the issues, I think, reported by the Talking Points memo series it wasn't exactly a revelation, I don't think, but it was laid out pretty clearly that, yeah, Cheeseborough was somebody who the other Trump advisors told he had to ratchet down the rhetoric. Don't tell him that Pence can make the decision, because that's not true. I don't want his hopes to get up on it. And if you mention it, he's going to latch onto it and never let go. And who knows what's going to happen as a result. Anyway, he went ahead and did that anyhow and said, oopsie, I did it. But now, as it turns out, it was always his plan, even though he was telling investigators, no, I never told that to Trump. I was instructed not to. Well, he told the gatekeepers that he wouldn't, and he lied to them, and he told the investigators that he didn't, and he lied to them as well. So here's this last section of the CNN story. Pence can count the votes. Speaking to Michigan investigators, and Michigan's in the middle of everything, Chesebro criticized the more radical plan put forth by conservative John Eastman. He's trying to pin this on Eastman, which included having state legislatures choose their own slate of electors for Pence to count on January 6th. And here's a quote. So Eastman, he had this idea that state legislatures could somehow be effective in overturning the courts, which I thought was ridiculous. Chesebro told investigators, but under his online alter ego, Badger Pundit, after the election, he tweeted numerous times that Pence had the power to count the fake electors benefiting Trump. I think Pence, in counting electoral votes, could decide that the electoral votes of the legislature take priority, the pseudonymous Twitter account wrote on November 7th. 2020, hours after the election was called for Biden by multiple media outlets. Though Chesebro's lawyers told CNN that Badger Pundit and the Trump campaign never intersected, okay, sure, you caught us dead to rights. That is his Twitter account, but that's okay because he never used the Badger Pundit account to tell the Trump campaign that they ought to be calling on Pence to count the electoral votes in this way. Well, he kind of did. Emails obtained by CNN reveal that he sent 2 emails to the campaign citing a Badger Pundit thread, arguing that Pence had the power to count disputed electoral votes. Chesebro sent the thread to Eastman and Trump lawyer Boris Epshteyn, but did not tell them it was his account. The email shows he was just some genius from the internet that he had discovered. That's very interesting. And then, of course, to say that the two never intersected seems to be a lie as well. I didn't, as Badger Pundit, email them. I emailed them a link to Badger Pundit and just didn't tell them it was me. Well, that's the intersection. That's not going to help you. On November 9th, 2020, Badger Pundit wrote, quote, I predict that on December 14th, this is a bad prediction, in several states, both the Trump and Biden electors will cast their votes, and the electoral votes of any state still in dispute on January 6th won't be counted. There were none. Anyway, if neither candidate has 270 votes, the House will then vote Trump a second term. A few days later, on November 11th, Badger Pundit repeatedly tweeted that the fake electors could cast their votes for Trump and that Republican legislatures would certify only those votes. And in fact, they didn't certify any of those votes. They certified the regular ones. And they didn't in fact, the legislatures never certified anything because that's never been their role. But other state officials certified the ones that they were supposed to certify. And no state legislature moved to even create an alternative slate, which is why Chesebro then rigged up having someone else create the alternative slate. The legislatures all refused to go along with his stupid plan. Anyway, he writes as Badger Pundit, it's obvious Trump will win. That's pretty wrong. You overlook the power of the Republican legislatures to certify that Trump is the winner, thus leading the Senate not to find that Biden attained 270 electoral votes. Then, game over, he wrote, which could have happened. It's just that he didn't have anyone on his side. None of the people that he needed to do the things he needed them to do in order to effect this plan would agree to do it. He was totally alone in that. It could have worked. It's just no one would do it. Okay. Badger Pundit wrote on December 28th, 2020, my understanding is that the votes of the Trump-Pence electors who were actually on the ballot in the contested states. So if whoever counts electoral votes thinks they won, well, they won. Again, sort of kind of illustrating what's actually happening here. My understanding, as he said, in other words, he's being asked, or he's telling people, who are these fake electors, as Jerry Seinfeld might put it, if he were the presiding judge in all this. The fake electors, as he's saying, in most cases were, in fact, people who had stood for election to the Electoral College legitimately as Trump, putative Trump electors. They just lost the election. And then said, well, we don't think we did, and so we're going to vote as electors anyway, and in some cases had to try to secret themselves into the state capitol, and in other cases gave up entirely and voted elsewhere. But yes, he says, my understanding is that they're the ones who were actually on the ballot. But he was basically saying, well, look, at bottom, if the Congress is supposed to count the electoral votes and they decide that they're going to count the other electoral votes, the other so-called electoral votes, the fake ones, well, if they decide that that's who they think won, then they did win. And, yeah, at some level, that's probably true. Again, it's just that he couldn't get the courts to go along with that. He couldn't get any state legislators to go along with that. He couldn't get any federal legislators to go along with that in any way that they were able to prevail with. And he couldn't get the Vice President, Mike Pence, to go along with it either. And he never even had a chance to convince the Supreme Court. It's just, he asked everybody who could have affected this to help him, and they all said no. Cheeseborough traveled to Washington in early January 2021. You know what else happened in early January 2021? Yeah, the riot at the Capitol. So they might have asked him, well, were you in Washington, D.C. on January 6th? Yes. Oh, really? Tell me, why were you there? Well, this is the answer he gave them. Cheeseborough traveled to Washington in early January 2021, he told investigators, to be available for strategy meetings. All right, sure, fine. Now, here's the problem. To be available for strategy meetings? How available were you for strategy meetings? Because as it turns out, he was seen outside the U.S. Capitol, the place where they were not having strategy meetings, on January 6th, following Alex Jones, a guy with whom they almost certainly had no strategy meetings. He would not be capable of having a strategy meeting, and certainly you wouldn't be having it in the riot. Cheeseborough says he came to D.C. for strategy meetings, but went to the riot instead. And mind you, he's telling all the investigators, oh, the riot was the worst thing. We didn't want that to happen. That was definitely something we didn't want, because that would distract from our legal theories. Your legal theories, though, were insurrectionist all by themselves. Well, no, not mine. Badger Pundit's legal theories, they were insurrectionist. I was protecting the president from the insurrection by telling him, don't listen, don't do these things, don't listen to these crazy guys on the internet. But if you do want somebody on the internet, just to offer a second opinion. Now, I don't agree with it, but if you want a second opinion, here it is. And it's this guy no one knows, Badger Pundit. I don't know why he's such a genius, but he is. Meanwhile, I got to go to the riot. I'm going to hang out with Alex Jones. How are you available for strategy meetings outside the Capitol on January 6th with Alex Jones? You are not. Anyway, even after the Capitol riot on January 6th, 2021, Cheeseborough continued to insist that Pence had the power to count electors to benefit Trump, but he pretended his hands were tied. Badger Pundit tweeted on January 7th, 2021, which he should have been tweeting, oh, I can't breathe, they're hanging me. But instead, he was tweeting, there was a non-frivolous argument that the Electoral Count Act is unconstitutional, and the VP has the power to count as Jefferson did. Pence could have set up the test case, yet he pretended his hands were tied, and Trump really believes he won. Which, of course, means he's delusional, and they should use that in court as well, in a commitment proceeding. But anyway, how do you like that? A non-frivolous argument that the Electoral Count Act is unconstitutional. Armando doesn't disagree, but perhaps for different reasons. But there you go. Sort of interesting. So he's using this Twitter account to launder his craziest ideas into the discourse without having to, I guess, answer to investigators, or at least this was his plan originally, without having to answer to investigators as to why he was pushing this thing. Why did the Trump organization, or rather the Trump campaign, get to the stage they did to where they arranged for and approved of a violent, riotous insurrection happening at the Capitol on January 6th? And the answer is Cheeseborough told them to. But Cheeseborough is telling investigators, no, I told them the opposite. P.S. I didn't tell you that I was using Twitter to tell them the opposite of the opposite. And that I was the one providing them with the links. They didn't even just randomly find Badger Pundit and I winked at the fact that it was me. I handed them the links to Badger Pundit and didn't tell them it was me. And I also didn't tell investigators it was me, but it was me. So that's interesting, I think. And speaking of finding things unconstitutional, here's a story that popped up yesterday that I don't think I even managed to put away in Pocket. But if I can scroll back and find it yesterday, it's just an interesting thing. Here we go. A report from Reuters from out of, you'll never believe it, Texas, in the Northern District of Texas. At that, in terms of the federal courts there, a U.S. judge in Texas rules congressional passage of the 2022 spending bill unconstitutional. Everything's unconstitutional. How do you like that? Why did they need to do it? Well, there's a convoluted reason. How did they do it? That's a convoluted reason as well. Nate Raymond lays it out, I think, pretty clearly here. A federal judge in Texas on Tuesday ruled that a $1.7 trillion government funding bill, the omnibus spending bill, was unconstitutionally passed in 2022 through a pandemic-era rule that allowed lawmakers in the U.S. House of Representatives to vote by proxy rather than in person. Essentially, what's going on here is Ken Paxton needed some provision to which he objected, which was contained in the 2022 appropriations bills. And I forget exactly how they put this one together, but I assume that they did one, again, an omnibus spending bill. At any rate, it contained a provision he objected to and didn't want to have to honor. And so his methodology here was not that there was anything wrong with the individual provision, but rather the bill in which it was passed under pandemic, height of the pandemic era, rules allowing for proxy voting in the House of Representatives, which I don't see anything in the Constitution that says that they can use proxy votes, so therefore it's unconstitutional, except there is a part of the Constitution that says, well, the House of Representatives and the Senate both have the prerogative of adopting their rules of procedure, and they have done so, and it really should be an non-justiciable issue of the House exercising its authority to adopt its own rules of procedure. But instead, the judge says, well, I don't see it in the Constitution where it says anything about proxy voting, and therefore it's unconstitutional. And all the spending that was done in 2022 for the 2023 budget is all unconstitutional. But that would create chaos, so I'm just limiting it to the part that Ken Paxton asked me to invalidate. And that's what he's doing. U.S. District Judge James Wesley Hendricks in Lubbock reached that conclusion as he granted Republican Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's request to block a provision of that bill that, what's the horrible thing it does? Gives pregnant workers stronger legal protections. Because, as you know, Republicans hate pregnant people, right? You're not allowed to have the babies. You're not allowed to not have the babies. Basically, what we're saying is, if you can get pregnant, we hate you. So there you go. Just wanted to make sure that there were no legal protections for people who get pregnant. And by the way, also no legal protections for people who get pregnant and don't want to be pregnant. We're definitely going to prosecute them as well. And if you want to avoid the whole thing by preventing pregnancy, we'll prosecute you for that instead. And if you do want to get pregnant but can't, and find a scientific method that will make it possible for you, well, we'll prosecute you for doing that as well. So basically they're just saying, if you have the ability to get pregnant, you're under arrest. Thank you, Texas. No wonder you're on fire. The judge, an appointee of Republican former President Donald Trump, yes, I know, and a lot of people pointed to that, but I have something to tell you about him, called the scope of his ruling limited and said it did not block all of the spending law. Texas had only sought, the part they needed to block 2 provisions, ultimately, including the one provision, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, because you shouldn't be fair to pregnant people. Well, he blocked that from being enforced, by the way, against the state after finding the bill was wrongly passed. That law requires employers, by the way, to provide pregnant workers with reasonable accommodations. You want a chair? No, you're fired. I don't know. We'll see what kind of accommodations that they need for these things. But by the way, so yes, he was appointed by Donald Trump. So, okay, crazy Trump appointed judge says what? I have to point out, just for the record, according to the Wikipedia entry on this guy, he was originally an Obama appointee, but because Republicans were not allowing any more Obama appointees to go through, his appointment expired with the end of the Congress to which it had been made. And but because he was probably, I would guess, being appointed by Obama as part of an agreement with Texas Republican senators to allow other appointments to be made that Obama actually did prefer. I'll give a sop to the Texas guys. They want this guy appointed to a judgeship, so I'll do it. He was probably not, Obama administration's first choice for anything, but he seemed like a reasonable enough choice for Republicans to make for themselves, I guess. And he was probably in there as part of a deal, but then they didn't even let that part of the deal go through. Anyway, he was reappointed by Donald Trump, and now he became a Trump appointee. And, he had a whole career in the Department of Justice in, high-ranking jobs that really probably should have required his political clearance by the Obama administration. I think he was, under the Obama administration, chief of the appellate division at DOJ. I'm not clear whether he was chief of the entire appellate division or just the criminal appellate division. But, there's a criminal and civil appellate divisions. But that doesn't become entirely clear in the Wikipedia entry. But it does become clear that he was at some point appointed by Obama. He just didn't make it all the way there. Anyway, I just thought this was an interesting article, certainly an interesting development, and I don't know how he justifies getting in the way. I mean, I see how he justifies it. We'll read it, I guess. We'll continue on. How does he justify getting in the way of the House adopting its own rules of procedure? He points to requirements in the Constitution that there be a quorum present to do business, and that historically that has meant physically present in the room, in the chamber, not by proxy, even though this was kind of an emergency measure, and it is really up to the House to determine its own rules of proceeding. But he's going to intervene anyway because reasons, and he goes ahead and does that. That seems a little odd, to say the least. All I'm saying is, so it's one thing to say, okay, well, then the appropriations bill was improperly passed. I guess I'm going to have to see the paperwork on the appointment. I don't know. On this judge and his appointment. I don't know that this guy is really a federal judge. He says he is. He's got robes. People seem to think he is, but I didn't see the paperwork. Did you? Okay, fine. You want to do technicalities? Let's examine the technicalities. Show me the paperwork by which Donald Trump appointed him to the bench, and then by which the appointment was ratified by the Senate. And I'll just look and see whether I think there are any deficiencies in there. I don't know. Was it robo-signed? Was it auto-pen signed by the Trump White House? Did he really send? Does that count? I don't know. Let's litigate it. I'm just saying they forged electoral votes. Maybe they didn't get the paperwork right on this judge. We got to check. At a minimum, we should put a stay on his decision until we can determine that there wasn't any monkey business going on in his appointment and confirmation to the bench. If there wasn't, we'll see what happens. But if there was, well, then we obviously can't let the ruling stand. Well, anyway, to continue with the story, the judge has issued an injunction barring the U.S. Department of Justice and Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, which Clarence Thomas hates, as you know, because he used to head it, from enforcing that provision in cases involving state government employees. His order did not apply to other workers in Texas, just the pregnant ones. The Justice Department, which defended the bill on behalf of Democratic President Joe Biden's administration, declined to comment. Paxton, in a lawsuit filed last year, argued the spending package enacted in December of 2022 was unconstitutionally passed, as more than half of the House, then led by Democrats, were not physically present to provide a quorum, and voted by proxy. Then Speaker Nancy Pelosi helped implement the proxy voting rule in May of 2020 following the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic as an emergency measure. It was ditched when Republicans took control of the House following the 2022 elections after an earlier unsuccessful court challenge. That is to say, there was earlier a challenge to whether or not proxy voting was legal, and it was unsuccessful. Why that didn't control this judge's decision? Well, probably from another district. We could click on that and see what the story was way back when. U.S. Supreme Court rejects House Republicans' challenge to pandemic-era voting rules. That should control. I wonder why it didn't. Well, let me finish reading this other story, and then we'll hop over to that one. And I guess that sets up what we could be doing tomorrow, which is the resurrection recently of a... not that one, but a new look, not a resurrection of an old look, but a new look at the new difficulties involved in teaching constitutional law in law schools. It's just dawning on some constitutional law professors that constitutional law isn't what it used to be, let's say, and has to be taught a little differently, like there's no such thing anymore. Anyway, just to finish up this article, in a 120-page ruling, Hendricks said that for over 2 centuries before the novel proxy voting rules adoption, Congress understood that the Constitution's quorum clause required a majority of members of the House or Senate to be physically present to have a quorum to pass legislation. Supreme Court precedent has long held, he says, that the quorum clause requires presence, and the clause's text distinguishes those absent members from the quorum and provides a mechanism for obtaining a physical quorum by compelling absent members to attend, he wrote. But that, by the way, the quorum requirement is not self-executing. Someone has to be recognized on the floor to make a point of order that a quorum is not present. And then they have to establish that a quorum is not present. And if they don't do that, then it could be the case that a quorum isn't present. It just doesn't matter for procedural purposes. All right. Anyway, Paxton in a statement said he was relieved the court upheld the Constitution, saying Pelosi abused proxy voting under the pretext of COVID-19 to pass this law. Then Biden signed it, knowing they violated the Constitution. While Hendricks ruled in Texas's favor, he found that the state lacked standing, somehow, to challenge $20 million appropriated in the bill to fund a pilot program that provided voluntary case management and other services to non-citizens in immigration removal proceedings. How interesting is that? All right, that's something else we could look into. But in the meantime, let me take a quick look here at the unsuccessful court challenge, which was cited here. U.S. Supreme Court rejects House Republicans' challenge to pandemic-era voting rules, reported by Jan Wolfe for Reuters on January 24th of 2022. Let's see if this intersects. The U.S. Supreme Court, which apparently, should control even the Northern District of Texas, declined to hear a challenge by Republican lawmakers to pandemic-related proxy voting rules set by Speaker Nancy Pelosi in the Democratic-led House of Representatives that were tailored to limit exposure to COVID-19. The voting rules implemented in May of 2020 allow members of the 435-seat House, in case you didn't remember how many members there were, to serve as proxies for colleagues in quarantine or otherwise unable to cast floor votes in the chamber. The House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, remember him, and other lawmakers had asked the Supreme Court to reverse a lower court decision that allowed the remote voting rules to remain in effect. So the only people who actually reached the merits was the lower court. The resolution passed by the House enabled lawmakers to act as proxy for up to 10 colleagues at any one time, requiring that they disclose which members they intended to represent. The proxy voting system was embraced early in the pandemic and was intended to be temporary, but has been extended several times. The most recent extension was in effect at that point until February 13th, according to the timing of this article. Republican lawmakers have called the measure a violation of the Constitution, arguing that only lawmakers actually present within the halls of Congress can cast votes. Republicans also called the resolution a way for Democrats to maintain their slim majority in the House, regardless of whether all their members are present on Capitol Hill. Now, of course, they recognize the importance of being able to do that, don't they? Despite Republican opposition to the measure, both parties have taken advantage of the proxy voting system to work remotely, much like millions of other U.S. office workers. Last May, 7 House Democrats cast votes by proxy when they joined President Joe Biden on a visit to Ford Motor Company plant in Michigan. The following month, 9 House Republicans voted by proxy while visiting the U.S.-Mexican border with former President Donald Trump. Anyway, a federal appeals court dealt a setback to McCarthy's legal challenge last July, affirming a lower court ruling. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit said it was foreclosed from reviewing the proxy voting rules. The D.C. Circuit's 3-judge panel cited the Constitution's speech or debate clause that offers broad protection to members against lawsuits for actions they undertake as legislators. I wouldn't even have thought to bring that in. I just would have made it non-justiciable. Anyway, as a political question, the House has embraced other rules that aimed at protecting lawmakers during the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, what it says here is that a trial court said no, they can. Well, interestingly, they chose they may or may not be able to do this under their prerogative to control their own rules of procedure. But the real point is that they are protected from lawsuit against it by the speech and debate clause. That was a loss for the Republicans. They appealed it to the D.C. Court of Appeals and lost there, too.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Interesting. And then, of course, the Supreme Court declined to even take the case from the D.C. Circuit and let their decision stand. But apparently in Northern District of Texas, they say, this didn't happen in our circuit, right? It didn't happen in the 5th Circuit, so we don't have to listen to it. And the whole thing got stood on its head. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. For now, Justice Putnam takes the mic.